Hello and welcome to Something Inventive. On this episode, we'll be talking about WordPress Gutenberg. Yes, we'll be diving into that, a bit more of the history and more depth. And I've got a special guest, Kimb Jones from the company Make Do, who we'll introduce in just a moment. The episode is sponsored by Inventive People, where you can hire the right person for your next creative mini project. So let's just jump straight into it. Thank you for joining me, Kim.
Hello, Ben.
You were introduced to me by Elliot from the WordPress Meetup Cheltenham, and I tried to get in touch with you at WordCamp Bristol, but unfortunately we weren't able to tie it together. However, managed to find you on Twitter afterwards and convince you into doing a talk with us. Would you tell us a little bit about your history?
I run a small remote agency called Make Do, specializing in WordPress, as we'll get to that. Started out about 5 years ago. We actually started out as an events management company, which turned out to be something that we realized we couldn't really monetize as much as the web development, web design aspect of it. So we pivoted just to be pure development. At the time, I was already doing a lot of WordPress development. My co-founder, Matt, he was on board with it too. We both had jobs in public sector that we left to start the agency. Then we grew it out, hired people in Manchester. We've got someone down in Essex now, team in Sheffield as well. And I'm personally up in Barnsley, Yorkshire. And if I get a little bit too Yorkshire with the accent, you'll just have to wave your hand so that I understand to start talking Queen's English. But yeah, we've specialised in WordPress for quite a while now, and Gutenberg's really exciting for us. We're mainly a team of engineering experts. We have one designer in the team. I'm actually sort of more design, front-end, X-design personally, before I went into sort of managing the team and running the business side of things, which I'm sure any person that started an agency can relate to, because you just can't build the sites, design the sites, develop the sites while you're also doing sales, invoicing, etc.
And how did you find that, moving from the very hands-on role to managing?
Pretty slow process. We hired front-end developer directly in response to me not having time to do both jobs, so that helped. And then I eventually started to hand over work to them. Then when we hired another member of the team who could also do design front end as well, I stepped back entirely and I only worked on some legacy stuff. Still do a bit of help desk because I can still dive into WordPress and fix things if needed. I found it was managed pretty well, I think, because it was a long process rather than me just holding hands up and saying, I'm never going to write code again. And now I look at some of the stuff the team are doing with the way that they write code in things like front-end frameworking and the way that they use GitHub even. I wouldn't know where to start.
No.
So I just think fair play to them. If they all just fell off a cliff, I would not be able to do any of our work now. They're all much better at it than I am. So yeah, it was good. I think the hardest thing obviously is not coming from any kind of sales marketing background. That's got to be learned painfully over time. Client management, because project management as well is a big part of the job, making sure things are being done.
It is, yeah.
So that was hard. I did some of that in my previous roles in public sector, but no, it was just experience over the years. We did hire a business coach actually for a year.
Yeah, was that helpful?
It was. The majority of the stuff we learned from them was organization, sales and marketing, around how to better present the team and how to just hold yourself together. But there was a lot of team management stuff that I still use today. So if the team needs help, or if we're struggling with projects, or if there's personal problems, then that kind of knowledge was a big help. But I think after a year of coaching, probably all right.
Yeah.
Some coaches people work with long term, maybe 10, 20 years. We separated with our coach about 6 months ago. And like I said, I still use some of their methods today, but it's not something that I think I'd ever go back to, because it's like we've learned the key bits. We still haven't implemented some of the stuff that we need to. But yeah, that was really good. I think that.
Well, sometimes it's good to revisit that. You can sort of get that knowledge off and run with it, and then maybe revisit it years down the line and see if there's any other changes or any other practices. Because it's as much as you can take on board that knowledge and run with it. Yep. If you're just focusing always on the company, you don't see other opportunities. But you're the sort of person now that gets out and about and is able to see opportunities at other companies and without looking inward.
Yeah, one of the best things I do is I meet up with other founders in similar position to me. They've got agencies of varying size, 5, 10, up to 60, 100 people. And we all get together and talk about it. And we've got a Slack channel and things like that. So that's probably more helpful than the coaching, because it's real life experience.
Exactly. Yeah,
it's aspirational as well. So
yeah, we work with a coach, Simon Williams, over in Worcester.
Oh.
I think he's from a franchise Action Coach. I don't think he's with them any longer. Yeah. Very American.
Exactly the same. Ours. Right. I bet you've read the Brad Sugars book.
Yes, he's created lots of books.
You've probably got this one as well. The questions are the answers. This is one of the coaching books that I got. Maybe.
Oh yeah, I've got lots of material. I keep it. Actually, let me find mine.
Yeah. That's not to say that I read them all, but this one was pretty good.
Here it is.
Oh yeah, Action Club.
Yeah, this is it. Welcome to your 90-day planning. I mean, I thought it was really good, actually.
Yep.
It's certainly valuable. I did the same with you, ran it for a year. Got a lot out. There's a lot I still use because we actually do a lot of coaching in our business. So there's a lot I still use.
Very nice.
There's something really fun called a critical non-essential, which I was told about. And it was essentially something that people don't expect, but is almost invaluable. And it could be like a book. So it could be like your book that you've given them. They sign up for a project. You go to that first meeting and you give them this book, which is really helpful and handy.
Yep.
It doesn't cost you much, but to them, it's like, wow, I did not expect it.
That sounds exactly the same as the kind of things we picked up. Above, below the line, under the iceberg, all that sort of thing. Yeah. It was all really Americanized, but to be honest,
it is, and a lot of it's canned and repeated, but
you got to get into it, haven't you? Yeah, you got to shed your British sensibilities. And just roll with it.
Did you do the? There was a little thing that Simon did at the end of his workshops or in between breaks, where you'd stand up and make a wee noise or something like that.
Oh, we didn't do that. No. I think
it was unique to Simon.
I think that was a cult that you were in.
Moving on then. Let me share the screen and we'll have a look at your website. You've got some impressive projects actually. Something we were talking about just before we started recording was you working with NHS Digital and how you're moving them forward.
Oh yeah, I mentioned public sector. I actually worked in the NHS for 12 years, various roles in our local hospital trust. IT to start off with, and then moved into sort of web marketing. Ended up being sort of the person that ran everything that was web, whether it was intranet or extranet. When I left, it actually became very difficult to work with the NHS because as a solo agency, especially with no real business behind you, you can't tender for work as strong as some of the bigger firms. So finally, we've come back around and we're working with some NHS clients now. A few years later, you can see there's Doncaster there. Their site is one of the more recent case studies. But we've always had, because of my previous work with the NHS, we've always had really good contacts with the team over in Leeds, and that's where NHS Digital are now based, or they've got an office there. And the Leadership Academy, NHS Leadership Academy, they are working on a WordPress library or a WordPress theme for the NHS front-end library, which is a bit like the government gov.uk front-end design library. Quite new, but it's wonderful because what it can do to an NHS project is strip out maybe 25-30% of the budget because there's no need for heavily customized design because you just use a standardized design library. One of the problems is the NHS Digital team don't use WordPress, but the NHS leadership team do. So we went in actually 2 weeks ago, sat down with them all, and we said, well, we think we can help. It's not an actual project. We're doing it as part of a community project, working alongside them. We've released WordPress NHS themes in the past. One of them's on our site called Bevan, and that is what we're trying to upgrade now to use Gutenberg. So what we're essentially working on is taking all the NHS Digital library elements, putting them into a theme and a series of plugins, and then you'll be able to use them on your site. Benefit to us is we'll be able to spin up WordPress sites for NHS organizations that actually look and feel like a proper NHS site a lot quicker, and hopefully it'll set them in the right direction.
Yeah, and they have that consistency as well, which is so important. Whereas you do find a lot of projects under maybe a parent company or a parent organization, they will be going off in different directions, which is fine if they've got the budget to do that, or they can evolve. But it's nice to have a good standard starting place. That's really great. And where can I find those themes on your site?
If you go to
plugins and tools.
Yeah, if you go to /NHS theme, I don't actually think there's a link to it on the site.
We'll see.
You can get to it just by Googling WordPress NHS, I think. So that is the...
Oh, that's it. Yeah, great.
So that's the demo. So this is a theme demo that we set up that uses the library. Very basic. As you can see, there's no content in there. These are the Gutenberg blocks that you get out of the box. Plan is just to expand this. The problem is originally there were two streams. So the Leadership Academy were creating their own thing. We were working on ours, and it just seemed logical to bring the work together because we were doing it anyway. We're not at that stage yet where we've brought the work properly together. So this is as far as we got. Pull this together was maybe a couple 2 or 3 days work from our front-end team, because all they did was take the NHS library, apply it to some WordPress templates, did a bit of Gutenberg customization. Bob's your uncle, you've got an NHS WordPress site. Clearly, if you wanted a fully customized out of the something that's not just out of the box, then it needs a lot more work. If you wanted to set up a basic NHS blog or whatever, you could do it by downloading that. The link to the theme that's used on there is on GitHub. So we're at github.com/mkdo. That's pretty much it.
Oh, that's great. So the idea behind this is is something they can use for free?
Yeah.
Right. So great. So they can use that for free. And I guess from your point of view, there's hope that you can come in and help with customization.
From a sales and marketing perspective, we obviously want to get something back. We want to give back to the community, the NHS team, and make sure that they're using WordPress in the right way. As well. So make sure that they're using it to sort of WordPress community standards. But our hope is that obviously there'll be an exposure element that we've helped to bring this to life. But ideally, yes, this will be used as a starting point for future NHS site projects, no matter how big or small. And it might be that it's relatively simple, a couple of days work of customization, or it might be a big intranet package, which we've recently started just prepping for, where you've got custom document management systems and private sections, forums, all that sort of thing. And you can use this on that, but it needs an additional work package to really make it happen. So
well, that's really nice, and it's nice to see that approach in terms of ultimately generating work, but giving something for free. There's, as part of our other side of the business, I go into smaller businesses and help them through a scheme called Fastershire.
All right.
To basically bring broadband and IT usage up to speed in Gloucestershire and Herefordshire.
All right.
So I speak to a lot of companies, and there are some who feel that maybe giving stuff away is going to be advantageous to competitors, or people just won't spend money off the back of that. Sure, there are definitely some people who are going to use, like with your theme, they'll use it and you won't get any work off the back of that. That doesn't matter. Those sort of people would want to use something for free anyway, because they've got no budget, so they have to. So they're going to find a free theme. Why not start with yours? And then because they like it, they're going to recommend you. So that referral is going to move on. Where so many people don't see that the investment that you've put in there is going to pay back. You may not see it directly, but it will pay back. And if nothing else, you can show when you're working with an NHS team that you're already up to speed on their brand and how it works and how you can implement it into the site. So I totally get it. It's a good way. Just before we move back onto Gutenberg, you've got these plugins and tools. Is there anything there that would be worth?
A lot of those have been sunset, or we've significantly changed them. The WooCommerce one, Gifted, is actually the most popular Gifted plugin for WooCommerce because it's super simple. The one at the top was popular for a short while, Restrict Content by Role, because it was just a way to restrict users and the way that they managed and edited content on the site. But it was superseded, to be honest, by better solutions. So a lot of those aren't necessarily massively up to date. Even the Kapow development tool at the bottom, we've recently transferred that into Kapow, I guess, 2.0, but we're adopting a new name. It's just going to be called the Make Do development platform.
Makes sense, yeah.
I think as great as we all love the name Kapow, it was pretty confusing to people who were using it. Then it makes more sense. Some love is definitely needed on that page, I think, but I'll get to that. So
it's good. Well, let's go back to Gutenberg. Maybe take us through a little bit of the history of Gutenberg and how you've got to where you are now, really, in terms of wanting to push it forward.
Yeah, so as a platform, Gutenberg first announced, 2-3 years ago. It was just announced as the new WordPress editor. A lot of sort of standard users weren't really aware that it was even, or has even been in development for this long. But the first version that was announced was back in sort of January 2017. And that was a way to bring the WordPress community together around a single idea that we needed a new editor, because the one that was in WordPress currently, as we all know, as great as it is, it's basic. And what tends to happen with WordPress is you get a lot of hacking around to try and make the editor do things that it shouldn't do. So shortcodes are a great example. They're not particularly usable. They're not particularly friendly. They don't make your code work on other systems. It's not non-transferable code base. And I'm saying this, and we used to use shortcodes and a system called Shortcake, which I'll get onto in a while quite extensively. But then you have Visual Composer, Beaver Builder, meta tools like ACF, CMB2. All of these solutions really came about because the editor was so basic. It was just a bit of a hack. I guess in my opinion, people started using these tools as a way to extend their WordPress sites without really coming to the conclusion that, okay, WordPress needs something in core. And as soon as I saw Gutenberg, the early sort of prototypes way back in January, it was like, wow, great, finally, we can get something that's in core, that's going to work. And crucially, being built by modern development standards, it's all JavaScript, uses React. It's not PHP or any sort of older technologies that, our team obviously love, and they're all experienced in these technologies, but there's a craving for developers to get using new stuff. And you think, okay, well, Gutenberg, it's the latest and greatest thing, and it uses JavaScript development, and our team now prefer developing in JavaScript and prefer developing in Gutenberg system to the older way of PHP development. They were having a chatting on Slack just this week about how they prefer the way code is. And it really surprised me. I've obviously never done it. Those two things really, the way that it was a usable new front end editor and also the development stack underneath, which was more modern and a bit more up to speed with how all the other CMSs are using, really made it desirable to me. Then it took a long time. I mean, it didn't get launched until December 2018.
That's right.
So
we had a podcast recording a couple of days before it was released saying, well, it's going to be released imminently. And by the time it went live, it had been released.
Yeah, to be fair, they were on that point of it's going to be released probably 5 or 6 times over that initial year. I don't think anyone understood that it would take so long. I spoke at an event May the 18th, 2017. I've got the slides that I can share with you, actually. It talks about how the new system works, what the foundations are going to be, and then it says that it's hopefully going to be in the next version of WordPress, which is, right around the corner. And it took forever from then to really get into core. One of the benefits of that is, though, everyone in our team saw Gutenberg, fell in love with it and thought, great. We might not have agreed with the way that it was being sort of rushed through, or that some of the community were correct in the frustration that maybe, only a small amount of people wanted a new editor. But my argument was always that we need a change. It may as well happen now. And I'd rather it was forced on us from sort of high up.
Completely agree. Because I was starting to see that other customers were preferring other platforms such as Squarespace, because that's got a similar-ish way of dragging around blocks. Wix to some degree. What's the other one? Weebly. I mean, I'm not advocating them as CMSs. No, I don't like them, but they have the drag and drop ability, which is what regular people like. And as much as a developer, once you've got everything in place, it can be great to copy and paste and move stuff around very easily. As a user of the site who wants to just maintain and develop it, it's not fun. So I could see a lot of people either griping about some of the ways they had to use it, or not, or preferring another system. So it needed to move forward.
It did, yeah. And I think plan for the future are that Gutenberg's going to take over things like widgets, the menu editor, all of the Gutenberg editor portion is now finished, and as we know, everyone's hopefully using it. But everything else in WordPress is going to hinge around Gutenberg's future being transforming the way that WordPress is used from the dashboard. So we got on board way back when it was initially announced. It took about a year really for documentation to become available fully, and for demos that actually work to become available. If you were like me, you had it installed bleeding edge plugin on the site just to play around with. And I did the same talk that you just that you shared quite a few times at different meetups, just to get some feedback from the community and just to warn people. It was funny, I did one in Manchester. I think it was December 2017. Yeah, because the Christmas market was on. That's why I remember. There were people there that didn't even know the editor was pending. And at that point, it was like 6 months away, even though it took a year. So it was good to do that and get feedback. Mostly negative, to be honest. I think a lot of people at these meetups were quite negative about it. But I was, trying to put a brave face on it. And at that time, our team were already playing around with it, developing, learning how it worked, which was difficult because, again, the documentation was non-existent. And then we fast forwarded to sort of about 6 or 7 months ago. We implemented it on some client sites. One of the NHS ones that's on our homepage that you referenced for Doncaster and Rotherham, that one is that's got some Gutenberg elements to it. We obviously installed it and got it running on our own website, on our agency site. And then I instructed the team, and this was probably the biggest benefit that we ever did to learn Gutenberg, was to do a hack day. We're a remote company, so we all work separately in different areas. So it wasn't all huddling around a conference room for a day, but it was actually a hack week because we had a gap in client work. So I said, all right, well, let's do this. And I sent, I think, a 5-page Word, a Google Drive doc, actually. So I want all these blocks developing, and some of them were things that we developed for other clients that weren't blocks, or they were using systems like Shortcake. And we just said, let's convert them into Gutenberg. And all the team had a goal that they would at least create, I think, 3 blocks within that period. The blocks would then be put forward to a public repo that we could share if so be. And over that, during that hack day process, I think the team learned quite a lot about Gutenberg, and I did too. I lost some of the development misgivings, and it really helped fast forward getting everyone in the team on board with developing for Gutenberg. And not long after that, we had what I would suggest was our biggest Gutenberg project that we've ever done, which was for sort of an energy company. I can't, unfortunately, because of NDAs, name their brand outright, but we were working with an agency partner who provided us with the design work, and we developed all that in Gutenberg, all the templates in Gutenberg. That was the first big Gutenberg project that we'd undertaken. Yeah, it took took longer, to be honest. The estimates that we had for the project were a little bit off because with Gutenberg, it requires some additional testing and there were still some unknowns, again, because of the lack of documentation. Even though the team have done all of the online Gutenberg courses, Gutenberg training courses, and digested all of the Gutenberg development literature, I think they learned more on that project actually doing it for real.
Yeah, you have to have a real project, don't you, to iron out all the kinks.
So that helped us now, and I think the confidence levels for Gutenberg are pretty high, ubiquitous now. We don't even think about doing it any other way. It's obviously it's got to be Gutenberg. So that's how we adapted to it. In terms of training, I mentioned a moment ago, there's a site called Gutenberg.courses.
Right.
And if you go to the development section on that, there's a wonderful man by the name of Zach Gordon, who is out. I've met him a few times. He's done training for our team actually on a one-to-one basis at a retreat they went to. And his courses are pretty much the industry standard for WordPress Gutenberg development. So if you want to learn how to be a Gutenberg developer, then Zach Gordon's content really is top of the list. There's new ones out all the time, and he's updating it all the time. Often got a sale on, so you can buy it for half price. Or there's also a JavaScript course that he does, WordPress for JavaScript. His site is JavaScript for WP.com, and really all of his training stuff is spot on. It's what we did, where we sent our team. That we bought them all licenses for his courses, and we got them doing the examples. The outcome of that as well was we've developed our own Gutenberg, I guess not really a starter kit, boilerplate system. I can send you the link for that as well. It's on our blog and on our GitHub, and that's just a way to, a very basic block and then add to it. So every time we now create new blocks, new Gutenberg elements, we take that internally, and it's based on some of Zach Gordon's learning and what we've learned. You just modify that and work from that as a boilerplate. And it's funny, I asked the team this morning on Slack, do you have any more links to share? Because I know that we were going to talk about this. And it's still pretty light on the ground in terms of Gutenberg training, Gutenberg documentation. And I think Dave was the one that said, we've pretty much learned it all ourselves because there's no de facto way to do it yet. Even some of the more experienced developers in the community are still learning how it works because it's only 6 months old, really, from being merged into core. I think if you were to start anywhere, it would be the Zach Gordon courses, but really just play around with it, get it on a site, hack it up, create your own blocks. It does seem, again, speaking as a non-developer, to seem relatively straightforward to take our boilerplate and turn it into a block. We've got a blog post on our site that walks you through it. So can test to it as an actual developer. But what I can say is that it's got to be done. If you're a WordPress developer, learning Gutenberg development has to be the number one priority. So
yeah, it does. Certainly for future sites. If you're just maintaining existing ones, then it's maybe not something you need to touch. But if you ever want to develop new sites, it's certainly worth it. We mentioned, I think when we were conversing up until before we started recording, how we used to use Visual Composer. And that was really a solution to get around this big editor window where you could just put any arbitrary HTML in there. So Visual Composer was a real leap forward in terms of actually being able to structure some of the information, drag and dropping content. I mean, it didn't look pretty, but it did do the job pretty well. There are others you mentioned.
Yeah, so Beaver Builder, there was Site Origin Builder.
I hadn't heard of that one, no.
Site Origin, we were introduced to it on a big project we still work on today, and that was round about the same time as Visual Composer, but it used a different widget system, and a little bit easier to use in our opinion, but still pretty clunky, still very difficult to manage. Visual Composer gets a lot of flack, mainly because it's included now with pretty much every theme for its theme. So what we find is that it's been completely overused. I'm sure the people who engineered it never imagined it could be bent and bruised in the way that it has been. It is, like you say, a good solution for the time. And I remember seeing a demo first, and I was like, wow, that looks great. But when you actually use it, and when you look at what it does to your site, I mean, the shortcodes, the performance problems, the way it slows down sites.
There's a lot of shortcodes.
It's a problem. It's a big problem. And we at Make Do, we do a lot of secondary hosting and support and maintenance. Probably 50% of the sites that we host as an agency, we haven't built. Other people have built. They've come to us for help to do security maintenance upgrades for them, and maybe the odd tweak. And the majority of them use Visual Composer or ACF, two technologies we don't use, but we're aware of and we have experience with. And it's mainly because they've been built by other people and then handed over. And then things like Visual Composer is definitely an issue with some clients because my site's slow, and the answer is it's because it's Visual Composer. What can we do? Oh, we can redevelop it. That's going to cost probably more than what it did in the first place. So it is a problem. but we obviously we live in the WordPress economy, so we have to support these tools. Hopefully a changing tide now, and Visual Composer and even Beaver Builder, which is a massive tool. I think there's 1 million active subscribers of that, which is more than use Squarespace as a platform.
Wow.
That is just amazing that they've got that kind of customer base. I've even seen it now on Theme Forest that people have started to release Gutenberg block themes versus, instead of using Visual Composer or other systems. So it's definitely turning around. It is a shame. We never use Visual Composer on a client site. We would build everything to try and keep it quite maintainable. I mentioned Shortcake because Shortcake was kind of the closest thing that you could get to Gutenberg before Gutenberg, because you could create your own shortcode-based visual editing tool where you could drop things into the editor. It would be using WordPress's core functionality, which a shortcode is.
But really the benefit of using Gutenberg is it's going to be built in. So it's going to be used by at least every new install, unless they're sort of negating out with plugins.
Yeah.
And it's in its interest to be as fast and robust as possible. And it's not that these other plugins won't be, but they're always hacking and adding on to WordPress rather than being part of it. So I totally agree with you that it's not only the way forward because it's default, also it's going to be most likely the best way to develop.
Yeah, I sort of touched on that. I was interviewed by Web Designer Mag. God, I can't remember when it was. I've got a link to it, maybe June, July last year, maybe the year before. And I said it's the same thing. It's going to be in core. Everything else previously was just a hack. It was just a way around a problem with WordPress. This is now the solution.
Well, let's do a sponsor break and we'll come back to that. So our sponsor for this episode is Inventive People. Inventive People is a collective of creative, technical and marketing folk that I've worked with over the last 9-10 years of Rather Inventive. And really, we put it together because it can be a pain to find the right person for a small project, from deciding what you need to, designing the brief, getting a cost, dealing with all the uncertainties of working with someone new. So we put together Inventive People, which is at least 60 common tasks, although that is growing in marketing, promotion, development as well. You'll know the cost, how long it's going to take and what is and isn't included, all before you agree to do anything, and you can buy it all online and then deal with us either remotely or a visit if that's necessary. So I'll give you an example. So this is Inventive People here, and I want to dive into a meeting. So I need to sort of push my marketing strategy forward. So I'm going to go into internet marketing, and we've actually got a new product down the bottom, digital marketing support meeting, actually with me. So we can click on that. You can get to see me talking to some of the clients there. Just an example that I am a real person and I do speak to other clients and they are generally happy about it. You've also got a little video you can watch, gives you an example of what we might talk about. And then we've got what's included, what isn't included. So if we're far away, then there's some travel costs. Plus you also get 1 year's membership to our Inventive Marketing Club. So hopefully what we're trying to do is present product on the site that is well balanced and you can see exactly what you're after. So let's say you wanted that. We only want half a day. That should be enough for the strategy meeting. We can add that to our cart, go to checkout. And if you're a listener to this podcast, make sure you include the code Inventive Podcast in there for a 20% discount. Pop your details in and then pay. And that's it. You can pay by credit card or bank transfer if you prefer, whatever works. And then in this case, I'll get in touch with you and we'll organize that meeting. It's all very straightforward. So if you need a blog article written, website updates, some new staff photos, or even a case study on site, check out inventivepeople.co.uk and make sure to use that discount code Inventive Podcast for 20% off. Okay, shall we move on for a demo?
Sounds good.
Let's have a look at this. So this is just a standard new site that I set up this morning, and this is a sample.
What you're running here then is the 2019 theme, which is built for Gutenberg. Yeah. So you should be able to just use sort of the out-of-the-box blocks to create new content. So give it a run. Some of the more basic features are the way that you can drag and drop things around so you can move paragraphs around easier. One of the key changes to our client expectations around it was what you've just done, the way that you now have headings and paragraphs as separate entities on the page. Previously, a heading...
That takes a bit of getting used to.
Oh, yeah, definitely, because a heading was just a select and then from the editor drop-down change to a heading. Now it's this thing that you can move around. Anyway, much better to have it like that. We all have issues with, making sure customers are delivering SEO-friendly copy. So making sure that H1s and H2s and properly identifiable, I think, makes it a lot easier. The other thing was the way that you can transform certain blocks. So you've got a paragraph there. If you click the paragraph, you can turn it into a list or a quote. And again, having a list as a separate thing, because normally you just press the little bullet point option in the editor editor. It helps because it means that people appreciate lists for what they are. They're separate pieces of content that sit outside of a paragraph. They're not going to try aligning them left or right. And that sort of thing, again, just takes a little bit getting used to. But I will say this, when I now do WordPress demos in either a sales pitch or in a environment where we've already got a site that isn't Gutenberg, the client response is always incredibly positive.
I think with WordPress, a lot of the HTML that is there in terms of quotes, different styles of heading, they're there, but they're hidden away. They're not so accessible until you know where the drop down is. But with this, it's quite nice because you can say, well, I want to transfer a bit of text into a quote, so I can either transfer it into a quote, or I want I want to drop an image in, so I can just click image, go to the media library. I don't think there's anything in here. I haven't dumped anything in, but I could just select my image. And the media library is exactly the same, so people are familiar with that. They pick the image, and then they've got an image block there, and you can have lots of different formats for it, where you can have content around it and have it stretched full screen. I mean, it's out of the box. It's not bad in terms of what it can do.
That's what I mean. We even sometimes throw in like a block library. There's Atomic Blocks, which is a popular one. There's Co-blocks, and these block libraries are just another way to add out of the box a ton of options that they can add, carousels, different accordions, even things like that, that you don't really have to develop custom anymore because and there's a block economy growing in WordPress, where people can create these things. As a purist, I would prefer every block to have its own plugin, or at least if there's a few similar blocks, then they're in a separate plugin. That's how we work.
Why is that?
I think it's because if we use some of our site examples that we've developed, so we would take the theme, flesh it out as a design, and then any blocks within the theme that are custom go into a plugin that's specific to that project. And that's because what you can then do is you can take the plugin, disable it, or install it on another site, and it separates the concerns around the theme and the plugin. So if the client wishes to maybe change something in their theme, then they've still got the blocks available in a different, slightly separated function to make it easier to customize. The NHS design elements that we talked about earlier, they can be installed on any site. Therefore, you've got the blocks. You could start adding them to NHS websites that are decades old, but you get the ability to use some of the more modern layout functions and some of the more modern elements. So Gutenberg itself, there's a lot out of the box. Great things that WordPress 5.2 introduced was you can turn some off now. So you can go to Gutenberg settings. The verse block, for example, no one ever uses verse.
Where is that?
I think if you just type V at the top into the little search, there's a verse block. Yeah, there it is. No one ever uses that, so we get rid of that.
What's that for?
It's for like a bit of poetry.
Oh right, yeah, of course.
And all of the embeds as well. A lot of the embed, if you look at, it's got YouTube, Vimeo, sites you've never heard of. What we often do is turn those off, because what WordPress does is it's intelligent enough to know if you drop in a link from YouTube, it automatically embeds the video anyway.
So I've not tried that actually. So it would automatically create a block for me like this with the embedded.
Yeah. So we offer that more as a training thing. We say just copy the link in and it'll automatically do the work for you. And it's a shame you don't have any images, because the benefits around image editing and image layout in Gutenberg far better than any previous version of WordPress. You can have wider images, like you've got one there, a full width image. You can create cover images. Cover images are a big win. We use them a lot on our own agency website. Cover image can really transform the way that a page looks, and you can use them for calls to action. One of the things that I do often is just select the list, the options for that list. You can create what's known as a reusable block. So if you created a nice cover image with some text and a button inside, store that as a reusable block. And then when you're editing content elsewhere, you just drop that reusable block in, and it becomes something that you can use over and over again.
Right. Yeah. So that's really nice. You've got the sort of creator built within it.
Yeah. So it saves you just time having. So there you go. So if you put like a nice title in, and then underneath that you get a little paragraph. And buttons in Gutenberg sometimes don't work too well within cover images, depending on the theme. But with a bit of customization and some CSS, you can make the buttons stand out. And yeah, there's tons of options, color as well. So you can change, if you just select a text block and go to the color options, things on the right-hand side. What's interesting here is you see the warning. So if you had blue on blue, it warns you that that's not an accessible color palette. So this theme just has 4 colors. However, Gutenberg just installed out of the box has a full color library. So you can have a color picker and really go to town and create incredibly ugly text boxes. But with some customization, you can get around that to make sure that your clients don't have green and yellow text and things like that.
We're only saving them from themselves.
Exactly, yeah. And they'll prefer it as well, because you plug in their brand colors, and it just adds that extra layer of value to a WordPress site, because you're not really doing that much development work all you're doing is changing a few key functions, and it gives them a lot more flexibility. There's a training overhead. I'm not going to lie, I do a lot of video training now where I will record a little screencast and then hand it over to the client. And I feel like since we've switched to Gutenberg, that's a lot more. We have a lot more just to point them in the right direction. But it will tail off once they've all got used to it, I think. So a lot of that is because of the custom blocks as well, because we need to show them what all the options are.
I think it's the same with another thing. People come into WordPress, there's if you're new to it, then there's a lot of training needed on that. I think with this, there is more you can do. So that's why there's more training off.
As great as this is, everyone I think fell in love with this when they saw it. The latest version is a little bit easier because it makes it more identifiable where the columns actually are. You know, you've got a little button that says add something to this column. But yeah, dragging and dropping things around, just think it's a browser an issue, isn't it? It's not something that's...
Yeah, like it just takes a little while to find it, but once you've got it, it does drop in the right place. Or deleting things. Sometimes this little tab at the side doesn't show up. So it's quite a tricky thing to do, to make a navigation be very usable, but also disappear out of the way. So when you click off, you actually get a good idea of what the page is going to look like.
Another pro tip, if you like, if you install the Gutenberg plugin on this site, what that does is essentially upgrades all of the Gutenberg functionality to the latest version.
That are not in core.
Yeah, so that's not recommended for your client sites because they'll have sort of bleeding edge Gutenberg blocks that might break. One of the key issues with Gutenberg is, let's say I create a custom block and then the client says, oh, actually we need a new field on that, or we need to change the style of that list. The block itself breaks and can't be edited because the way that Gutenberg renders HTML, it's changed so transformatively, it means you can't go back. So you've got to recreate the block. If you do that with the plugin, let's say you added some columns to a site using the plugin, and then when they eventually came around to release that, things can unfortunately break quite easily. That's a struggle that we found during development when we give access to a client site, they start adding content, and then we change something in Gutenberg, and then they can't edit that content. Again, the Gutenberg team have said that they're aware of the problem, but it's not something that they can fix because it's a technology issue rather than a Gutenberg issue. And it is fixable using server-side rendering and things like that. It's just something to be aware of. So now we try our best really to make sure that every Gutenberg block is in its final unbreakable, if you like, version.
Yeah, well, it works really well. It's just getting used to it. And I don't think it's any more difficult. It's just something to get used to, and because it allows you so much more flexibility, the more you can do. It's definitely worth people playing around with it, or if they don't have it on their website, seeing whether that can be an option to get the developer to update it, depending on how much they might charge for that. It's certainly worth it.
Yeah, and to be clear, you can upgrade WordPress 5 point whatever. Don't think that it'll break your website because you just install this plugin called the Classic Editor.
Yeah.
That's recommended by the core WordPress team. Classic Editor is installed, again, on the majority of the sites we manage, just because if it wasn't, the sites would break.
No, we did exactly the same thing. When it was launched, we installed Classic Editor just to get things where we were, and then for new sites, progressively update, making sure they're updated.
The worry is that certain people are thinking, oh, I'm not going to upgrade to 5 because I don't like Gutenberg. But that means you've still got all those security and...
Yeah, you miss out on all the security updates.
So get Classic Editor installed and just upgrade. It won't change anything about your... Well, it will change some of the WordPress functions outside of the editor, but it won't change the way that your site...
We've had great experience with that. We've got a variety of different sites made with all those lovely plugins you like, ACF and Visual Composer.
Oh my.
And they but even just updating, they're not broken. The editor becomes Gutenberg, so you can't edit it, but you install the Classic Editor plugin and you're back to where you were again, and it's absolutely fine. It's not had any issues whatsoever. Is there anything else we want to cover, or because we need to round off now, although I could continue talking all day?
Our agency managed to adapt quite quickly, mainly because we got on the bandwagon very early. We followed the development of the platform on WordPress.org, which I can share some links to their block editor guidelines. They've got a handbook that is pretty good for developers. So it's definitely a learning curve. From a business perspective, though, it just makes sense because selling Gutenberg is much easier than selling just WordPress out of the box. It makes sites quicker and easier to develop longer term. At the moment, sites take a little bit longer just because of the unknowns. 2 years' time, it'll be much easier and much faster. You won't have to use ACF just to add extra fields to a site, or you won't have to use Visual Composer or any of the other block editing tools or site builders, because it'll all be in there and it'll all be sort of the de facto way of working. And the benefit really is that I can hand that to another WordPress developer or another WordPress team, and it's in core. You know, they've got documentation. You know, you're not tied to a particular third-party add-on. The one piece of advice, again, I touched on it earlier, was the hack day. The hack day was brilliant because it was an internal project with no client expectations, and it was just go and build some blocks. Just pick some random blocks and build them. It turned out a lot of the blocks, that playground, if you like, of being able to do that, I think really focused the team.
To round off, I'm just going to touch on some of our recent, mainly podcasts actually on our blog. I've been particularly busy going to a lot of conferences. I've already mentioned the WordCamp Bristol ones. Another one we went to recently, which was really good actually, been there for 3 years now, is Web Expo Guildford, WXG7, down in Guildford, obviously. I went down there with Claire and Al. The theme for that year was Tech for Good. So really they wanted anyone, all the speakers were people who had something where tech was either affecting the environment positively. There was a lot of conversation about mental health and how tech can help people or how it hinders people in some ways. There was one by Daniel Harvey. I mean, it was a really good talk. He was an excellent speaker. I've linked in there, which is worth a read as well. He's basically talking about all the bad things that are happening and how we can either just not exacerbate it by clicking on the links, watching the videos, going down those YouTube rabbit holes and that sort of thing, and trying to put positive message out there and doing good stuff. So that was our chat afterwards where we looked at all of those topics. But if anyone is around Guildford around June time, then it's definitely worth looking at. The other one, and now this has been in the pipeline for a long time, and I'm really sorry, Matt, who I interviewed on this. This is for a company called Whitley Jones. I interviewed them last year, at the end of last year. And the reason it's been hanging around is because it was a different interview to normal. I say slightly different in the intro notes here. It was completely different. I wanted to get a feel of a family business and how a family business has not only grown for 20 years, but how they are managing succession, which I think is really important. A lot of people don't think about in a business, how you move out of that business, whether you're going to sell it, whether you're going to pass it on to your son, you're going to bring in a new management team, how are you going to move that forward? So I interviewed Chris and Jane, who are basically mum and dad in the company and the original entrepreneurs. Then you've got Matt Jones, who's the director and eventual successor. It's their son. Lucy Jones, who's in there in the finance, so she's going to take over on being the finance director. And then Simon Downs, who's like the current managing director. Plus we had a factory tour. I did a lot and I found it really difficult to put together as a podcast. It wasn't a straight interview like this or a conversation. I had to put it together in a way that had some story, some flow to it. Apologies, Matt, for taking so long, but I think it's really worth people listening to. And also finally, just check out our events. We run lots of events throughout the year. Do check our event page, ratherinventive.com/events. Got lots of stuff coming up. A lot of it's free, so do come and meet us in Swindon or Cirencester or Gloucester, wherever we're hanging out. Let's see, we've had actually a couple of lovely reviews and ratings, although they've left no comments, so I can't read anything out. But thank you very much for people going on to iTunes and managing to find out how to review a podcast. That's really kind of you. Thank you very much. So as we finish, Kim, where can we find you online? Where's the best place to get in touch if people want to know more about Gutenberg and anything else?
Oh, it's probably our site, so makedo.net. There's a contact form on there, phone number. If you want to email me direct, it's just Kim, that's KIMB @makedo.net. Really, I'm most active on Twitter at MK Jones, MKJONES. LinkedIn, not so much, but tends to be the place to do business these days. So I can always connect to me on LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Thank you.
All right, mate.
People can find me. I'm at Ben Kinnaird on Twitter, or you can get in touch with us. hello@ratherinventive.com. Sponsor for this episode is Inventive People. So you can go to inventivepeople.co.uk. Make sure you use the code Inventive Podcast for 20% off. Show notes for this episode should be linked within the podcast you're listening to, or you can go to ratherinventive.com/podcast. And if you like this podcast, do support it by letting other people know. Just rate us on iTunes. That's all I ask. It helps it become more visible and more people find it online. Or you can sign up to our Inventive Marketing Club. So we meet online each month to discuss a marketing topic. I think recently we've discussed how to get 5-star reviews, YouTube stats, LinkedIn. The link will be in the show notes for that. Thank you very much, Kim, for your time. I do appreciate it.
No problem.
And thanks to everyone else for listening.